Oh, kia ora. No, mai haere. I think I might invite my 3 wingmen here to introduce themselves. You probably know them all, but I would feel more comfortable if they introduce themselves to our audience today. So kia ora there, Jason.
Kia ora tātou, kia ora moana. Just for me, tuatahi, no tūhoi ahau, no te whakatohi anō hoki, no Ngā Te Awa, no Ngā Te Kaungunu, ki te Wairoa anō hoki, I tipu ahau, I Rotorua, I raru I te maru o te aroa, o Ngā Te Whakauhi. Engari, kai ko nei ahau e noho ana, ki āmu tana, kia ora. I guess for me, the main thing is really my main sort of area of interest in mahi and all that sort of thing is Indigenous entrepreneurship and Māori entrepreneurship and thinking about Māori enterprises in terms of what makes them successful, what helps our Māori enterprises to grow and develop, and what kind of support that sort of enables them to do that. And thinking about that, where are our Māori enterprises? They're in all sort of sectors. They're sort of agribusiness, entrepreneurship, digital sectors, and they're also involved in Indigenous international trade. And so I've been really interested in sort of understanding what it is they do, how they operate, in terms of my research and all the sorts of mahi that I've been doing. So, yeah. Kia ora.
Oh, kia ora, Jason. Thank you for convening this too on behalf of all of us. Tane, tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe e moana, kia ora koutou katoa, aku mihi ki a koutou katoa. Hiuri no te tai tukarau me te whakatohia, ko Tane Waetford taku ingoa. I'm 6'1", I'm from Ngāpuhi. No shirts will be ripped today. It would be a terrible thing.
Thank God.
I'll see.
And yes, I'm also an MFATer. We might get a little bit into that in our kōrero, but I've been with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade for 14 years. I might actually touch on it at the moment, actually. I feel very privileged and honoured to be here. Apart from a completely accidental life, my career has been sort of rather accidental as well. University was never destined for me, and yet I ended up there. Law was never destined for me, and yet I ended up there. And after my undergraduate degree, stayed on at Victoria University as the Kaitako Aingature, Māori Law Student Coordinator. That was my opportunity to give back, to return some of that manaaki that I'd received in order to get me through my studies, and had the great honour of having Moana Jackson as my mentor over those 4 years. And mihi atu ki a koe e and I recall telling him the day when I said, I'm going to work at MFAT. And his response was expected, actually. I expected the response that he gave to me. And that was never in my long-term sights either. That's something that I fell into as well. And yet have made that my career. And we get to talk a little bit about that in the kōrero around the kaupapa for today. Kia ora.
I can see you falling out of MFAT into Ngā Toki Whakarururanga, given your habits.
My habits?
Given your track record, I just always up for a new challenge. Tēnā koe, my friend Maui. I think we first met around about the Y262 days. Ngā mihi ki a koe.
Oh, kia ora Moana. Whare Wānanga e tu nei, tēnā kōtau, the hunga kāinga o Waikato Tainui, ngā mihi ki ngā mate, me ngā aitua, ki te kaihanga I homaiti o tangohi o hoki. No reira, I ngā waka i ngā mana, me ngā karangatanga maha, koe mā konoma, raurangatira, tēnā kōtou, hokomenatai, me rongo. So, Maui Solomon, I'm moriori, ngaitahu and Pākehā. So I've got a bit of German, English, Irish, a little bit of French, Malaysian spice in there as well. So I come from a long line of war makers, peacemakers and whiskey makers. So good balance in life. But yeah, just in terms of my background, so in terms of work, started picking spuds down in South Canterbury and working shearing sheds and put myself through Canterbury University, law degree. Did I say Canterbury? Yeah, I did say Canterbury, yeah. And then sort of got involved in I went out as a barrister actually in 1992, and one of my first instructions as a barrister was from Moana Jackson and Karen Wycliffe from the Māori Legal Service, and it was a Y262 claim. So I kind of cut my teeth as a barrister on one of the biggest sort of claims to come before the Waitangi Tribunal. Probably if I'd known what would lay ahead of me at that time, I probably would have said, oh, no, give it to someone else. But I just want to acknowledge that people like Del Wihungi, Sana Murray, Tama Puata, John Hippolyte, Hore Parata, all of those ones who were, and I love the expression you used, they were futuristic, I think was that they were visionaries, and they copped a lot of flack back in the day when they filed their claims. And even our Prime Minister at the time, David Lange, was criticising Del, who went to Japan to bring the kumura back because it was in a database over there. This is 1988, so it goes to show how long this kaupapa has been around for. And they weren't really that well supported, even within Māoridom. I can remember going, what are you on about? But they were futuristic, they were visionaries, and they had courage. And I think listening to Annette, for all you young ones out there, have courage. Have the courage of your conviction and the belief. Because, the fight isn't over. It's actually just starting, right? It's really just starting. And we need those warriors to step up and keep that kaupapa going. So yeah, they were my inspiration in a legal context, and actually just working with those people, Moana was a huge privilege. I learned so much on the Y262 claim. And how I got involved in this kaupapa, I've actually got Moana to thank.
He's not over it, he needs counselling.
I sort of snuck off to Rekohu, to the island, because I took up a role of, I put my legal practice on hold in Wellington and went down to the island to sort of salvage our tribe from financial collapse. And so I was only going down there for 12 months, ended up staying for 12 years and still down there. But anyway, they're back on their feet and doing well. And so I thought I was going to hide out on Rekohu, which is the Moriori name for the Chathams. And that was, I'm now doing regenerative farming and I've got a nursery going and stuff. And I just happened to be with Moana 2 or 3 years ago, and she said, oh, Maui, she said, look, I'm just putting this little group together and we might need some advice, and you've been in Y262. It won't take too much time. 3 years later, and 100,000 emails from Professor Kelsey, and here I sit. So,
okay, moving on.
But anyway, I'm going to need that counsel. But it's honestly to work with people. When Moana said, you'll be working with Professor Jane Kelsey and Annette and all of these other people who are involved, and actually Kerry's here, and Holly Reynolds, and actually there's some awesome young rangatahi wahine Māori who are on this coast. Man, we're in good hands. We're in good shape. Some of our tane need to be stepping up. I'm not talking about you tane. But it seems to be the way it's being led by our wahine. And it may be because this is a time of nurturing and care.
And that's what Papatunuk is about, and I think there's that mothering. I'm going to get off on a tangent here, but I really believe this, hey? That's why people like Dal and Sana and Annette, you know, they're up there, they're the po, because they care, they've got that mothering, that nurturing instinct. And that's actually what we need today, because we're heading off a precipice. Lecture over, handing back to you.
That was actually quite nice, I quite like that. Well, I'm just going to ask you the first question, and then I'm going to swing it back to Tane and Jason. So we talked about Y262, which was a game changer in terms of collecting our thinking and putting it on record and give you some clear focus. And now you're one of our pūkenga, thanks to the 2522 claim, and you're our representative in the IPECTA, Indigenous Peoples Economic and Trade Cooperation Arrangement, that other acronym, IPECTA, that came out of the APEC process. I just wonder if you could just touch on the kinds of challenges, just thinking what Annette and Jess were talking about, a Tiriti-focused sort of CPTPP. What are some of the challenges that you've found over the years in pursuing Tiriti-based kaupapa in this context, in this trade space context?
Before answering that question, you know, we're all struggling with the acronyms and the abbreviations, and like, I'm always on to Jane saying, what does this mean? And actually what I've been learning about all of these abbreviations, it's like drinking out of a fire hydrant, right? It never stops. But yeah, so not surprised if people get it wrong. I just thought of one actually this morning when our mate Pahi was struggling with CPTPP, TPA, PPTA, and but an abbreviation, the one that I've used is called CPTPP, CPTPP. So you sip it, and then not very good tasting. I'm going to sip it.
Sip tip.
So there you go. You won't forget it.
Anyway, what's the biggest?
No, anyway, the
biggest challenge. Biggest challenge
is actually
remembering
the
acronyms.
The acronyms. No. So look, seriously though, when I was counsel for Y262, I filed urgency application when the GATT TRIPS agreement was coming in, General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs and Trade-Related Intellectual Property Rights. That's probably why they say GATT TRIPS. And so we applied for urgency in the tribunal for Y262, and that's where we narrowly lost, as Annette said, by 2 votes in the House to get the treaty provision in there. Now that's almost 30 years ago, right? And so things change so glacially, you know, very slowly. And so look, there has been change. The fact that we're here having this discussion, that was just not possible 20 years ago, 30 years, even 10 years ago. So that's an advancement. But in terms of substantive change, this is actually still just appearances. It's good appearances, the conversation's happening, but in terms of substantive change, that's very slow to happen. So I think it's the incrementalism, and Ngā Toki Whakarururanga is about transformation, and that's what attracts me to this. And of course, another challenge is, you know, the Crown is great at no offence, my brother, that the Crown is great at creating sort of divisions within Māori. I mean, we're good at creating those divisions ourselves, but they exploit them. And they play one off against the other. And that's an issue. But the way I see it is that, like, no matter what waka you're on, whatever rōpū you're part of, we're all sailing in the same direction. But some might be going out to that reef over there to drop a line and have a fish. Another one might be sailing a wee bit further out to go with that offshore island to get some birds. But Ngā Toki Whakarururanga is on a voyage of chartering uncharted waters. And you know what? We're all heading in the same direction, but that makes it harder being on Ngā Toki Whakarururanga, because you're going to run into more challenges, you're going to run into more storms, you're going to run into more criticisms. But the thing is, what's inspirational, not only the people you're working with, but actually you look to your ancestors. They didn't just sit at home, fishing at the near reef. They were prepared to go out. They were undaunted in their exploration, chartering new waters and looking for new lands. And that's what we need to do. We need to keep pushing, because the things that Annette has talked about are absolutely spot on. And then talking about free trade agreements, look, we're all in, Māori have a $70 billion economy, and we need to trade, we need to make money. But if you look at what's happening in the world today, we're putting profit in front of everything else. And actually, for Indigenous people and for Māori, papatūnuka and people come before profit. And that's the transformation, really, that we need to be heading towards. And that's going to be a big challenge, because the Crown is focused on that model, on that economic model, and all the other states that we're dealing with are focused on that same model. Where is that ending us?
Do you think that, like, if we're going to be straight up and frank, that Māori are on that same waka? Because I hear a lot about commercial benefits, about trade. We talk a lot about values, but are we actually walking the talk?
Well, that's what I was saying about the different waka. It just depends which waka you're in. We're all sailing in the same direction, and I'm not going to sit here and bag anyone else who's doing in a different waka doing something else. What I'm going to focus on is where our waka's heading. And so, there are also, if you're actually running a business, you might think, oh, well, there's short-term gains to be made from entering into this agreement or contract or whatever. And I'm not going to judge people for that. But they're doing it because that's the only game in town. If we can change the game and change the rules of the game and the values of the game, that's when you're going to bring people on board. So I'm not saying that Māori should just be, unless we're prepared to make change to the system, because the current system is not working. It's resulting in climate crisis, resulting in more poverty, in depletion of land and all of those sorts of things. So Indigenous people's worldviews are going to be absolutely critical, not just for Indigenous people, but for the world.
Ka pai there, matua. Hey, picking up on that, now Tane, you've spent the last couple of years inside MFAT trying to meet the expectations of, of those of us with that Tiriti-based kaupapa. You're working, with the Crown, inside the Crown. So what are the challenges that you face?
Start with the easy questions. Firstly, apologise that we missed the morning session. Had to take a bit of a detour via Auckland instead. So I missed what was said this morning. But firstly, if I may say, thank you Waikato University for hosting this hui, and in particular Ngā Toki Whakarururanga for today's program. Do want to make a clear and important point, I think, that New Zealand is hosting the CPTPP meetings this year. We do acknowledge that we got some things wrong. And the point of this conference, Te Kāhui Kiwa, is to hear from you around what trade should look like, in particular in relation to CPTPP, but more broadly, what international trade should look like, how it should represent the various interests, in particular Māori and Indigenous interests. So we acknowledge you for being here today, but your presence is not all we're after. We want your ideas, we want your thoughts. And I don't know if we've talked about the report yet,
Not yet,
Jason,
no.
but we want to capture those views and be able to present them to the CPTPP membership to continue those conversations and to continue shaping into international trade policy, international trade agreements. Some of the challenges in terms of working where I am or in the public service, Part of the challenge is getting there in the first place. The next challenge is staying there, and the next challenge is progressing, and the next challenge is having influence, and that's part of the challenge.
So when we're
And then getting to dealing with
dealing with us,
dealing with you lot.
Yes. So, I mean, it is. I keep saying it's a work in progress, and I guess the frustrating thing, and it would be nothing new, is that, and it doesn't matter what space Māori are working in, is that we have positions, we have a treaty focus, we express those powerfully sometimes, and then nothing happens. So that's the frustration from the Māori, from the outside the Crown space. So what is it like advocating inside the Crown space?
I see that less as a challenge, although not straightforward or easy, but more of an opportunity to be able to walk in both worlds, to lift Crown understanding, to lift colleagues' understandings, more than just giving karakia at the beginning of meetings, but to help lift and shape those understandings. I think our understanding of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, Treaty of Waitangi, needs to continue to evolve and grow beyond superficiality. That requires some honest conversations. And we've seen, just with the recent tribunal report, Maitaraki from the north, that conversation is ongoing. It continues to evolve, and so our understanding today here in 2023 has to be different in 2030, in 2035 and so on.
What would you say have been the major achievements in the last couple of years, I guess, or since, what would you say has moved the conversation around or along, or has it, around Te Tiriti?
Yeah, so I've not been in my current role for all that long, actually, less than 2 years. MFAT's a rotational career. It's my career pitch. Maui's done his pitch, my career pitch. It's a rotational one, and so things were happening. I was overseas, but around that TPP process, and I saw it all from afar. What I did not see was the 2522 tribunal claim. Wasn't involved in that. Wasn't involved in the mediation agreement between MFAT and Ngā Toki Whakarururanga. Wasn't involved in those discussions. We talked a little bit about that in the previous panel. That's been a major achievement, and there have been a number, but that has been a major achievement. MFAT meeting with Ngā Toki Whakarururanga with a set kaupapa and very clear objectives and extensive objectives around what that working relationship should look like. Is it perfect? No. But are we further along the path from where we were 2 years ago? I'd like to think so.
Do you think that incrementalism will move towards transformation, as Moana would often suggest needs to happen?
It has to be incremental.
It has to be transformative.
It has to be transformative, but it has to be incremental, little steps.
Incremental, we know all about incremental. That's the frustrating bit.
Big. I mean, there's it got the audience. How else do we do it? Think across the board. How else? Me as a, how else do you achieve progress?
Well, I suppose you could be a little bit more disruptive. I suppose we could think, I mean, there's kind of doing nothing, which is one bit. There's been incremental, then there's been a little bit more disruptive. We could shuffle things along the spectrum, I guess. That's another alternative. Hey.
I'm all for disruption.
Cool, kaupapa.
And, but, you know, if being this disruptive achieves this much progress, then, I mean, if you look at, you know, the progress that has been made since the tribunal was established in 75, here we are. Maths ain't so good, but many decades later, we are much further along the journey today from that origin, and it takes time.
Right, Tane. Jason, you've been pretty busy. Your name's popped up all over the place. You've been working hard, and one of your major projects was a Tiriti-based audit of the APEC process. That applied a template developed by Ngā Toki Whakarururanga to assess the APEC process, Māori process against the 4 articles of the treaty. How did you feel about that process? What kind of insights did that give you, or how did it land with you?
Well, kia ora, yeah, thank you for that, Pāpai. I was just really fortunate to be asked to help out on that project, and it was a bit nerve-wracking actually, because I had to sit in an interview, and in the interview was Peter Tipene, and a very formidable gentleman from the north, and then also Tracy Haupapa, and I had to convince them that I was the right person for the job. And so Peter, the first question he asked me is, Jason, what's your view on the tiriti o Waitangi and tiruranga tiritanga? I supported all the way there, Peter, all the way. And he goes, all right, I like that answer, yeah. Okay, well, might keep you on. And then the interview just continued. And somehow I was sort of given that opportunity to conduct the audit, and I was very pleased to be able to do that. And it was a Tiriti o Waitangi audit of New Zealand's hosting of APEC 2021. And fortunately, the framework, the methodology for that audit had already been created by Ngā Toki Whakarururanga. And there was about 76 questions in that audit framework, and everything that you could think of to ask about Tinuranga, Tiritanga, Māori and treaty rights was in that framework. So you couldn't go wrong. All you had to do was ask the question. So I did. And I had Jane counselling me, guiding me, which was just awesome. And what I learned in that process, I thought I sort of, I was, thinking about, I learned a few things about Te Tiriti o Waitangi through the work that Ngā Toki Whakarururanga had done and the framework. And basically, one of the key sort of insights for me was the Crown Authority, Kawanatana is there, Māori distinctive Māori authority is there, and it's a matter of how do the two meet. It's not about compromising one or the other or saying, well, we've got a balancing it. No. Mana motuhake, tinuranga tiritanga of Ngā Hapu, te ao Māori is there. And you can't, there's no sort of compromise there, it's just there. And so I went through that whole process of the audit there. And the other key thing that I really learned is what does true partnership look like? And it was a bit of a struggle, I must say, for, I guess, in terms of working out, well, what's the relationship between Māori and the Crown in the APEC, in terms of the APEC 2021 hosting. And the principles, if you want to look at, well, what does partnership look like and what does kind of the relationship between Māori and the Crown look like when it's according to Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the principles that were worked out between MFAT and Ngā Toki, but also the other groups that were involved, Whauma, there was also Te Taumata was there. We also had Whāriki, a Māori Business Network from up in Auckland. So they're all working out, well, how do we relate to one another? The principles actually spell that out quite clearly. Now, we don't have to agree, you know, the Crown Māori don't have to agree on, I don't like your way of thinking, you know, there's two ways of thinking there, and they come together through that whole process.
And so, what were the? Can you just explain what you did? I mean, so you had this template, these 75 questions, and so you're measuring. Give us an example of how you do it.
Well, how I did it is basically talk to everyone who wanted to talk to me, who was involved in organising and hosting APEC 2021 meetings, to ask them, well, what's your view on, in terms of how did you provide for Māori participation, Māori opportunities in this APEC process? How did you resource that? How did you measure the outcomes for Māori from this APEC process and the meetings and all of the kaupapa and all of that sort of stuff? And basically looked at all the documents. We're in the sort of the ministry's documents, the plans for APEC. Does it talk about Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and do those statements align with the Ngā Toki Whakarururanga Tiriti audit framework? And then also basically try to figure out, well, what's going on there?
And what was going on?
Well, there was...
But wait.
There was a lot of, there were a lot of meetings that were held. So two things probably stand out. One is the sort of regular meetings that we held between a group called Te Rangi Tūkupu. So a partnership body was set up called Te Rangi Tūkupu, which housed within that Te Taumata, Ngā Toki, Whāriki, and a few other, Whauma was in there. And basically those meetings was trying to work out, well, what are we going to do in terms of working together for events that support Māori economic and social and political development within APEC. And so that's one aspect. In terms of the events, a lot of it was kind of already sort of pre-planned. You know, by the time that I guess those discussions started to be had, a lot of the planning for how APEC would roll was sort of almost halfway through the year, and they only had 12 months. So it was really towards the back end that things started to happen.
And is there a potential for that? I mean, did you see value in that exercise, that kind of a model?
Oh yeah.
Is there potential for that to roll out again for different things?
I mean, yes. There's potential for that partnership arrangement where you've got all those different organisations working in relationship towards one another in other sectors, whether that's health, education, agribusiness, all those sort of other sectors as well.
With a Tiriti-focused audit going on, auditing, engagement, involvement, participation in decision-making, that sort of stuff? Yeah,
basically shared power, power sharing, shared decision-making, Māori having a say over policy that affects them, but being able to articulate that according to a Tiriti-based framework.
Tane, are you aware of how that was received by MFAT? Like, what was the viewpoint of that? Was it positive?
If I may just take one step back, Te Rangi Tūkupu in many ways set a template for MFAT in terms of MFAT Māori partnerships. A key outcome, as you mentioned earlier, one of those terrible acronyms, IPETCA, the Indigenous Peoples Economic Cooperation, Economic and Trade Cooperation Arrangement, was a direct result of Māori participation and Māori input and Māori driving that. Might also just mention Te Rangi Tūkupu is the name of the taiaha that belonged to my tupuna Kawati. Another blessing from the north. That Tiriti assessment was a pilot. First time done that I'm aware of. And I know that it was put in there by those who participated as part of that group. And so it's been a learning experience for us. We're very pleased to have had Dr Mika do that for us. And it's an honest assessment. of the things that were done well and that were achieved, as well as the areas where we fell short or where we could improve.
Kia ora. Now, Maui, you're quite positive about the IPECA Partnership Council.
IPECA, just think of IPECA.
Why they put the T in there for? Yeah.
Trade.
Oh, trade. Oh. Could you talk a little bit more about that and whether it might be a model that could be included in the CPTPP, or at least the Inclusive Trade Action Group?
Thanks, Moana. The IPECTA, in terms of the time that I've been involved with Ngā Toki Whakarururanga, is probably the most positive experience, which came out of APEC, and is something that Māori and Jane were, really promoting and pushing for, to have that kind of arrangement set up. So, but the good thing about it was that you had equal representatives of Indigenous peoples so Māori from New Zealand, from Australia, Aboriginals people, First Nations, Australia, Canada, and I think Taiwan, and then also state parties. So, it wasn't an equal. It was equal within that forum. And actually, it was a very respectful engagement, and it was led by, Indigenous people largely. And so we've set up, and it's sort of about developing Indigenous to Indigenous trade, but also Indigenous trading with non-Indigenous. But I think for me, one of the real great aspiration, I remember talking to an elder 30 years ago who was saying, we will have made it when we're trading with other Indigenous nations. That was 30 years ago. So, you've got people who are thinking out, and I think that's an important aspiration, because we can relate so easily. No matter where you go in the world, and you've been all over the world, I've been lucky enough to go to a lot of countries, you meet Indigenous people, you're immediately on the same wavelength, because you share the same set of values. So that's really important, and I'd like to see that IPECTA model, and that setting up sort of partnership councils between state and Indigenous people within every free trade agreement, every single one of them, as a stepping stone to something actually even more empowering. And probably the last thing I'd say, Moana, and something that Ngā Toki Whakarururanga is really pushing, and I know Tane has heard this many times, but it's crucial that Māori and Indigenous people have our own seat at the table, both domestically, and when I say seat, independently of the Crown, domestically and internationally. And this is nothing new. We were asking for that back in Y262. And actually the tribunal came out and even said they agreed with that. And they said there are times when the kawanatanga might have to take a back seat and have the Māori voice as the preeminent voice. So we've got the Waitangi Tribunal in 262 actually agreeing with that. And there are instances, particularly around, the climate crisis and environment and things like that, where the Indigenous voice should be the voice that is leading Aotearoa New Zealand.
Yes, and I know from that experience with the European Union, it wasn't even considered right at the start. There was no Sami or anything. I've just got a couple of questions here. Now, I'm not sure who wants to leap to the fray, but let me see. What will MFAT do differently for CPTPP hosting from when they hosted APEC based on Jason's audit? Now, that might be a Tane question, is it, Tane? Or Jason, both of you. What might be done differently?
So APEC 21 hosting APEC hosting is a very different exercise to hosting the CPTPP, which is largely boring officials locked away in a room. But one thing we are doing differently from 21 to this year, holding the sui.
Oh, so but the big thing that's going to happen in July, isn't there? Or Matariki? a big CPTPP gathering, isn't there?
So the trade ministers, the CPTPP trade ministers will be meeting
Yes.
over Matariki weekend.
Yes.
We will receive them with pōwhiri. There will be Matariki theming around that meeting, but it's largely a closed shop.
Okay, so that's. How does that fit with the audit, Jason? The sort of closed shop thing.
Well, you know, the APEC Tiriti audit looked at really what's a better way of sort of working together, and it sort of identified. If you look at the treaty framework, it talks about power sharing, equitable access to resources, Māori having a say about, you know, what goes on in these sorts of processes, and making sure that there is sort of good capability for Māori to be received in part of these sort of designing of what goes on and what's delivered, and that you know, there's exposure to opportunities. Because one of the things that Māori were looking forward to, unfortunately interrupted with COVID, was to be able to deliver, you know, some events that were sort of Māori focused, Māori led, to receive our sort of Indigenous sort of whānau from overseas. And that happened, but it happened online. So I think when you look at the framework from that perspective and the audit, I think that with, you know, the opportunity going forward to me is, well, how do we actually work together to design stuff that's going to be useful and going to work together?
Mm.
If I may say, again, going back to you, homework, tasking, there will be a session in that meeting with the ministers where treaty partner representatives will be able to present their views to those ministers. Part of that will be the outcome from this hui around what they want to see reflected in CPTPP.
Mm. Do you have a comment, Maui?
I was just going to remind Tane about that actually, because we were only talking about that 2 weeks ago, and he's forgotten that already. No, Ngā Toki had...
Bright lights.
Yeah. Ngā Toki had requested it to have a presence and to speak at that, and Tane said, yes, of course, Ngā Toki Whakarururanga must be there. I think, didn't you, what you say, Tane?
I think we'll anyway, have.
We'll have a beer afterwards. And we'll sort it out.
No, you'll be there.
Kia pai, kia ora. Now,
but we can still have a beer.
Yeah, we can see that.
Could you stop talking about beers? Okay. Question. Could you please confirm whether or not there is anything in the CPTPP that requires us to legislate changes to the way natural health products are produced in Aotearoa and made export ready? Who would like to answer that?
I'm looking to my left.
I'm looking to my left.
I'm looking to my right.
There's probably someone else out there who could answer that better than I. Hey, that wasn't on your list of questions.
This is the thingy.
This is the
it's
the
a
app.
very important question.
Oh, is it the questions from the audience?
Yes.
I see.
Yes.
Okay.
Beyond my expertise.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I don't have the technical
Anything there is legislate changes.
knowledge to answer that one.
Wait, natural health.
Yeah,
Yes, Donna
Donna,
Kerridge.
yes,
Could
she's
you
part
answer
of
this
Ngā
question,
Toki.
please?
Yeah, thank you, Donna.
I know.
Obviously, the answer is nothing.
You weren't meant to say that.
Zero.
Would you like to now answer it?
INFAT seems to have a huge role in terms of the therapeutic products bill, and so I'm trying to work out what role INFAT has in the development of internal domestic health policy and legislation. So I'm assuming it must be coming from our international trade agreements, hence the question.
There may be colleagues in the room who can answer that question, and you got the wrong person up here.
Does anyone from MFAT want to say something?
Well then,
Come back to me.
Yes.
we'll get back to you.
Just before we wind up,
Yes.
I know we're getting close, but I had actually prepared 3 brief slides. I wonder if someone up the back could just
Flash.
put them up. Yeah.
Ka pai.
Just yeah. Only take about a minute. Yeah. But look, while we're waiting for slides to go up, I just want to say one thing about, Māori working within government departments. I remember talking to a group at back in the 90s, and I was getting stuck into, government departments and, Māori working in them and undermining what was happening and blah, blah, blah. And this young Māori woman said, well, hold on a minute, we're working within these departments, we're doing our best, we're officials, and we take that back out to our people. And that made me think, it's important to recognise that Māori are working within government departments, and we should support that. And, it's whatever career they have, but the important thing is that they bring that back out and help our people eventually, Tane. So, no, but it's important not to, to bag our Māori who are working in those government departments, because we all have a pathway to follow, and some, so I've followed one pathway, others have followed other, and Tane's following his pathway.
Ka pai. There you go, Mr. Solomon.
This is this is one of my favourites. This is a Tom Scott one. I quite like that. It kind of says it all, really, doesn't it? Yeah. And then the next one. And this here, for those younger ones in here, won't recognise, but that's Geoffrey Palmer, who got the amendment in the Waitangi Tribunal, the Waitangi Act, Treaty Waitangi Act, to take claims back to 1840, right? But then later on, when he went out he stopped being a politician, became a lawyer, started undermining all of it because he thought Māori were getting too stroppy, so he wanted to cut that one down. And then the last one is quite a good one too.
Can you explain that?
Well, you just got to read the
I can't
captions.
read it.
Oh, can't you? Can you read it out there? Yeah. I'd have to put my glasses on. Another Tom Scott. Yeah.
Oh, I love Tom Scott.
Yeah.
How
Sorry,
fine.
mate.
That's all
I'll
right.
show them to you. I'll give you a private showing.
Well, thank you very much, Jason. Thank you for your kōrero. Tane, thank you for joining us on stage today and moving things along. And Maui, always wonderful to have you share your insights from your long, very committed career in this space. So, ngā mihi kia.
Kia ora.
And in honour of our moderator, we're all going to sing one of her waiata.
Oh, chair.
Aren't we? Are we? And you can help us, Moana.
What?
Yeah. Hey.
So you're getting flashed.
Come on.
What?
Choo. Hey, is it?
We are
Warriors.
Warriors.
The mighty nation. And across the wide creation, we won't kneel down, we won't kneel down upon the ground, upon the ground. Oh, how I'd love to hear them say my mighty name. Ka pai matua.
Kia ora, mate. I love that song.
Ka pai, kia ora tātou.